and I run a company called ClickTalk. And by run the company, I mean it's a company of one. Like you're looking at everything. I try and do I, I I do my best to do everything on my titles from art, game design, programming, business and bookkeeping, marketing, promotion, and all the customer service. The only thing I don't do is music. And the interesting thing is that I didn't have a lot of those skills before I started ClickTalk. I'd never done professional artwork. I could barely bring myself to do my own personal taxes. And marketing was just a complete black box, having worked at work for hire studios. It was something that was hidden from all of us. And I mean, what do marketing people even really know about marketing? And so everything I'm going to talk about today, I've been forced to learn just from starting my company. You may have figured out by my accent that I'm Australian. I'll try to keep my accent in check and talk slowly. Some of the other Australians have not done that. Please let me know if I'm talking too quickly. The interesting thing is I don't think of myself as being particularly Australian, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So I don't like cricket. In fact, I don't watch sport of any kind, and that's very unusual for an Australian, as I'm sure you're aware. And I was thinking about this when doing the presentation, and a lot of this stems from when I was a kid. We had, I come from a very poor background, and I was very lucky I had a computer, but we only had one television in the house. And so cricket season and test cricket, of course, goes for a very long time, and test cricket season was essentially, I can't play computer for the next 2 months. And so I think a lot of the hatred of cricket stems from there. I'm also not a racist. This is probably Australia's most famous racist, Pauline Hanson. And I have categoric proof. This is my wife. She's 7/8 Indian. And my daughter, she's 7/16 Indian, of course. But I see, how does that make you feel? Yes, I've recognised over the last few years that maybe I am a little more Australian than I like to think. My family are sheep farmers, and for the last 4 years, since founding ClickTalk, my wife and I and daughter and mum and dad have all been living on our on the sheep farm in extreme rural Victoria. We live 5 hours from one capital city, 5 hours from the other. We're 10 minutes from a town of 800 people. And the nearest McDonald's was an hour's drive away, like quite remote. When I step out of the house, this is my most commonly used footwear, I hate to admit. People do have odd perceptions of Australians, that we all ride down the streets of Sydney on kangaroos, and obviously this doesn't happen. But I took this photo in our backyard last week, and it's a bit hard to tell, but that is the biggest kangaroo I have ever seen. And it was a male, and that's as close as I'm going to get without it actually attacking me. And again, wherever I live, it's very difficult to take a photo without sheep in the background. So in conclusion, I'm probably a little bit too Aussie. And we'll kick off the talk now. How many of you went to Mahesh's talk just before? The marketing talk next door? It was actually really good, and I was worried when I saw there was going to be another marketing talk just before mine that we were going to be talking about exactly the same thing. But as it turns out, there's definitely new information here. So in preparing a talk for NASCOM, I wanted to talk about the things that would be relevant for you guys, and just thinking about situations like I started my company from nothing. I didn't have any money. I mean, other people in Australia could go ahead and take a real job and earn capital, and in a year maybe you could save, you know, $30,000, $40,000 if you're particularly frugal. But obviously for you guys and your day-to-day income is much harder. And so the things I did building a company up with no capital, I thought that would probably be really relevant for you guys and hopefully useful. And so I'm going to go over the tricks and the tactics I've learned over the last few years. And so now it's time to start the talk. One last thing. So this is a debut talk, and not only that, but this is actually my debut as actually doing a presentation. So bear with me. I hope I don't make too many mistakes or run over time. All right. So this is QuickTalk's journey through the ages. The company was founded, well, officially founded in 2009, but prior to that, I worked on Little Things I started in July 2008, incorporated the company just before the release of the game. Little Things was released on PC in October 2009. Super Search 60 came very soon after that, which is my first App Store game. Then Doodle Find very fast after that. And then I ported Little Things to iPad in August 2010. So there's a lot of activity there. Then I worked on multiple unreleased titles and finally got out another game, Zona, in November 2011, which I did with Rich Vreeland, who talked this morning. Little Things Forever, the one you saw just there, was released in May 2012 on PC and Mac in August, and I'm going to be releasing on Android very soon. And I'm currently working on 4 titles simultaneously. But the focus of today's talk, we're just going to ignore everything but the App Store, so that story starts in February 2010, essentially. All right, QuickTalk was founded on July 10th, 2008, on almost exactly the same day that the App Store debuted. I'd worked in mobile previously and was very skeptical of the mobile space at that time, so I didn't jump straight onto the App Store. I had my eye on the PC casual portals, which were doing really well at the time, like Big Fish, and I wanted to make a game that was going to do as well as it possibly could on there. And so Little Things was born, which is like you just saw it there, it's a hidden, that's the sequel, but the first one was very similar. It's a hidden object game. I thought that was something I could do well. It's fairly low tech. Before that, I hadn't done programming for 5 years. I was in production and game design since 2005, so about a 4-year break. So I'd never attempted artwork on a professional level before. And so, of course, I decided to do a game that was 95% artwork. I look back now and I think it's just absolutely crazy, and I was very lucky. I actually managed to get the game finished. So I worked very hard on the game, testing, making a product as good as it possibly could be, released it in 2009, and for 1 year's work, I earned $3,500. So panic set in. So 6-month-old daughter, no savings, living with my parents, just had a failed game. So of course, like anyone, I spent a week in bed. And then figured, all right, time to get out of bed and move on. Because like making games, I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. I think it's something I was probably born to do. And though Little Things didn't strike a chord with that market, I felt it was a really good game, regardless of the fact that no one played it. And I knew I had more in me. And so I had been watching the App Store during this time. I didn't completely turn my back on it. And it was the success of Flight Control, in particular, developed in Melbourne by Rob Murray and Firemint, and I knew him. And that really got my interest. And I knew he had spent very little time on it in his spare time and released it as an App Store test, and bam, instant fortune. And it's minimalistic, it was low cost of entry, and I figured, well, let's give this a shot. Now, the first thing I did is market research, which was actually really smart. So I was happy I'd come up with something that smart. It doesn't always happen, like making a game that sells really badly. So I wanted to figure out what makes a game a hit on the App Store, not from the angle of clones or which games are doing well or copy this one, but I wanted to fundamentally understand why a game does well. And I discovered the answer pretty quickly, being featured by Apple. So that obviously raises a few more questions. How on earth do you get a game featured by Apple? All right, so see the nice background there, get your attention. So this is a slide that you should pay attention to. There's a few in there. So what I did is I bought myself an iPod Touch and spent a month on a website called App Shopper. Have you all heard of App Shopper? So if you haven't heard of it, you absolutely need to be on it if you're interested in marketing at all. So back then they did. They have a popular tab and a what's new tab, and back then they didn't have a popular tab. All it did was list the games that came out in chronological order in a much easier way to browse than the App Store itself. And so every day I went through the lists, looking at screenshots, looking at icons, and drilling down on the ones I thought were interesting, buying the ones that looked good. And then I found, for that 4 weeks, I found that week after week, when the Apple features rolled around on Thursday, I was able to get a 90% success rate figuring out the apps that I thought were cool, and they were the ones that Apple picked. And that's really important, that you, like, Apple is predictable. They are going out of their way to pick the good games. They're not doing it randomly. And that gave me a lot of confidence to just go in and realize, okay, I think maybe I can do this. All right, so this is the first of many charts. So this is my App Store earnings of all time. You can't see it very well, unfortunately. The numbers down the side. So that peak there on the left is $7,000. That was my best. That's my best ever single day on the App Store. I should mention that also I earn money from other sources, including advertising from places like MobClicks and Chartboost. That's not on there. All right, now here is the downloads over time. And you can see these don't line up. So my peak day is October 2010, which was, I had 70,000 downloads on that one day. Okay, so spike 1, that big one on the left, is the release of Little Things on iPad. The blue spike, just to the right of it, is Doodle Find nearing the top of the charts in the USA. That's all money from iAd. The red spike is Doodle Find Pro being featured by Apple. The red one is just to the right of it. Can you see that one? It's sort of red and yellow, just after the blue. And the green spike is the release of Little Things Forever in May and June. And you can see sort of the slow build-up of traffic. that isn't zero on the left there. It's near zero. That's Super Search 60 from launch day, and I'll blow that up a bit later so we can look at it closely. The second spike is the release of Doodle Find. Sorry, the first spike is the release of Doodle Find, sorry, and the second one is the release of Doodle Find in the USA. And the final spike is when I launched Little Things Forever, I switched Little Things to free. So that's all free downloads of Little Things. 3 million downloads for across all my games. So Super Search 60 was my first game on iOS. I wanted to develop something very quickly. Like, I didn't want to spend a year on another title. I just wanted to get something done and out and start experimenting on the App Store. So 2 weeks of game development and 2 weeks of Facebook integration, which turned out to be a lot harder than I was expecting. And this was based on a mini game. I had a mini game idea I had during the development of Little Things. So Little Things was a failure, and I wanted to make the exact opposite game in the same genre. So Little Things is a very slow, meditative game, and this is how many things can you find in 60 seconds. And so, and that was it, really. Now this wasn't, unfortunately, this wasn't a success, and so, not at launch. Okay, so here's the blow up. So you can see there almost nothing for quite a long time. This is the timeline. This is about 4 months of time there. So during this time, I did nothing but watch the charts and try and figure out why no one was playing my game, do some experiments. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the changes that I made during this period and the effect that it had there. Like, obviously, Super Search 60 there's some interesting events there. So this is the first one. It looks like nothing, but what happened is I removed the mandatory Facebook sign-in. You had to sign in with Facebook or you couldn't play the game. So you can see there, from that point, the app is no longer losing customers, but gaining customers each day, just organically. And that was really good. So finally, I could experiment with a game, and I didn't feel like it was a loss anymore. That right there is the free app a day promotion. And that is one of probably the worst free app a day promotion they've had in their entire history. But for me, that was pretty good. That was 3,500 downloads in a day. I purchased a daily double slot, which was quite cheap. I didn't. My game was already free. No one paid any attention to it, and the icon probably wasn't very good. My screenshots weren't very good or weren't targeted to the free app a day audience. And so it was, in a way, it's probably wasted money, but it forced me to think really clearly about why people weren't even bothering to click on it. So, a light bulb came on. And from then on, I did have a larger pool of users to play with and experiment with. Okay, so the next spot there, version 3.0 was released. I did a number of changes. Icon, screenshots, changed the way the high score table worked, and keywords, and suddenly, like, that had a pretty major effect. Like you can see there, that's just organic growth. And also changed the category to puzzle and word. So the word category is not hotly contested at all. And so the visibility I got there, I believe, also had a big effect. So people were finding the game on the chart at last. And there, Doodle Find was released. And what happened is I basically flipped all the players from Super Search 60 into Doodle Find. So you can see the numbers trail off there as expected, because I no longer want people to play Super Search 60. I'll talk about that in a moment. Right, so I'm going to change tack a little bit there. So this is a bit of a motto for me. If you can do it yourself, then do it yourself. So again, with marketing, that was something I quickly learned to love. I really enjoyed marketing. So for years, marketing was hidden from me. You sort of have, in a traditional space, you have yourself, and then you have your producer, and then you have the external producer, and then you have the external producer talking to their marketing team, and finally you have the head of marketing. Like there's 5 layers, and there's no way of knowing how marketing works or why they're making those decisions, or half the time stupid decisions. Like no one should care or understand your customers more than you do. And so this do-it-yourself philosophy was forced on me, but it helped me realize, the extent of what I can do. And of course, that extends to, as I mentioned, that extends to artwork. And you may, as I said, I'd never done art before, and quickly was able to produce I think that's pretty good. Do you all think that looks professional? Programmer art, great programmer art. It's funny how I came onto this. I originally was going to look quite different. I wanted to do something that looked more like Where's Wally, and as I drew, I realised my limitations and just worked within them, and found, well, I think I can draw like this, and just kept at it and kept at it. And what's important here is I learned a new skill I never knew I had, and I saved myself a lot of money. And I mean, win-win really. All right, so I'll come back to marketing. So this was key to Doodle Find's success. Advertising the game before it came out. I'll talk about that now. So Super Search 60, and then Doodle Find was essentially the sequel. It's the same game, but with all the marketing mistakes taken out. So, I mean, if I say to you Super Search 60, you may not be able to picture what you do in that game. Maybe a word search, or maybe something to do with numbers or mathematics. But with Doodle Find, there's only one thing you can actually think that you would do there, and that's find doodles. And I make a little bit of a joke about that in the game. That's the only word of instructions essentially in the game. At the time, there was also a Best Doodle Games category on the App Store, led by Doodle Jump. And I looked longingly at that and always hoped to, maybe Apple might include me if this really does well, and that was a thing. So this is by far my most popular app. It was the #1 app in 5 countries, top 10 app in 19 countries, and has had 2.7 million downloads. So this is what I did. At the Super Search 60, at the end of every game, an ad pops up. And I was earning revenue from that, obviously. And so for the I think it was 2 or 3 weeks prior, I basically switched off all advertising, and this was the only banner I displayed. People could click on it, and it would take them to a web page, but that wasn't what was important. What I was trying to do was let people know a new game is coming. This is what the text looks like. The icon was modeled after this. And May 15th, May 15th, May 15th. They got after every single game. So they knew something was happening. on that date. And of course, when I switched on May 15th, I put up all new adverts. So ClickTok's newest game, Doodle Finder's out now, and the funny little animated snail, and download it this week to earn your early adopter star. All things designed to try and get people to download it this second. Don't waste your time, just get the game. Now, putting the ClickTok logo on there helped as well. At the time, I was running cross-promotional campaigns for some of my friends, as well as the paid adverts. I was doing that for free. And I found that if I included the ClickTok logo on those ads, I was getting 3 times as many click-throughs because people knew it was a game I was recommending, as opposed to just a random advert. So this is the unit shifted for Doodle Find from launch day until a few months later. So the peak day there is 50,000. It tailed off quite quickly, but obviously that's quite good, and that didn't include the US. So what you'll note here, like up to that point, and where the arrow is, that's all based on my own cross promotion work. No assistance from Apple, no anything. That's just the Super Search 60 players coming in, and that's a lot. That's 10,000 a day, and even with an Apple feature, it only got up to 50,000. And that's the number one in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau, and high charting in a lot of other countries. So that's the screenshot. A very happy day indeed. But I was disappointed that the USA, it was never featured in the USA, and I'll talk about that. It was eventually knocked off, by the way, by Grand Theft Auto, and I was completely okay with that. So I'm going to talk about, this is obviously not my game, this is a third-party case study. So this is a pre-promotion technique. This is the only other person, I'm sure other people are, but this is the only example I've seen of another company doing that pre-advertising. So whenever they have a new game coming out, well, pretty much all the time that pops up, but when they have a new game coming out, it says this, May 15th. And this is a kids app. So my daughter plays this game, and that thing pops up 2 weeks in advance, and for 2 weeks, I cannot get any rest. She just complains. She wants that game right now. And of course, I am going to download it on May 15th just to shut her the hell up. And it works. They consistently get all of their apps charting again and again and again. Like the Toca Taylor, I mean, it's featured this week on Apple, but it wasn't featured last week, but it was still to the top of the chart, just based on their own cross-promotion. So I'm only a one-man band developer, as I said, and I only have 5 games, and I'm sure some of you out there might have a larger portfolio of games, and I'd be very jealous of you in that case, because you can use this technique far better than I can. Okay. So this should probably read, the only good paid advertising is burst advertising. There's lots of ways to do free advertising, and free advertising always makes sense. And again, I'll talk about that shortly. So the way the App Store chart works, it calculates units are sold over a period of time. And if you're advertising and making money from those units and just advertising slowly, good for you. It means you have a killer app with great value. But for the rest of us, advertising is the only thing it gives us is a chance to drive our app up the charts. And the only way to do that is to get people to download your game in large numbers and very quickly. So obviously the best burst advertising slot is getting featured by Apple in a slot such as iPad App of the Week, like Little Things was. And that's why Little Things did really well. New and Noteworthy is also great. I've heard a few people talk down the Apple advertising slots, and I get a little upset because it's worth its weight in gold. If you have a New and Noteworthy slot and you haven't done very well out of it, that's because maybe your icon is bad, your screenshots aren't attractive, your cell text is wrong. I mean, if you get given this, it is just it's a lifeline. So don't disparage it, cherish it. Have you all heard of free app a day? Yep. So that's the burst marketing king. My experience with it did not go very well, but people continue to use it all the time. Big companies will always launch their games. If they're doing a free game, they'll launch it on free app a day. They'll do as much as they can on that opening day, and it works. So if you advertise on free app a day, don't do what I did. Only pony up for the big slot. if you're going to do it, you may as well pay the money. So I may have contradicted myself. The $0 mentioned in the title may have been misleading, but in that way, I was actually pouring the money in that I'd previously earned. So the $0 was, I am spending some money on advertising, even though Mahesh may have told you not to. It can help, but you only want to do it in certain ways. So just deal with it. So Gtechna, how many people have heard of that company? It's a little unusual. So when DoodleFind was big in the UK, Australia, Germany and Singapore and other places, like I said, it was not featured in the US and it pissed me off. And so I started looking for other ways to do that, to get it into the chart, because I knew if it got into the chart some way, it would sell because it had already done well in those other countries. So Gtechna I happened across one day and they had this rather catchy slogan on their website, from unknown to top 25 in only 3 days, guaranteed. And I thought, why the hell not? I don't care how they're doing it, I'm going to give that a try. So this is my Gtechna, the chart from my Gtechna promotion. So you can see a very sharp rise there over the 3 days they promoted me. They guaranteed top 25. I actually got up to number 3 in the USA using this technique. I found out later that Gtechna achieves this using botnets rather than advertising. And so it's kind of interesting because if it was just a botnet and that was all it was doing, I would have earned no, I should have earned no money. But actually, the fact that I rose up the chart, I got a lot of new customers, new real customers who are playing the game and continue to play the game to this day. And so that's the chart. I eventually got up to that's the US chart. You can see I eventually got up to number 3. Yeah. So I continued to maintain a high chart place for quite a long time after the botnet had switched off after 3 days. Now, no one can do this anymore. The use of this services has since been, and rightly so, outlawed by Apple. But I thought you might be interested to see exactly what can happen in that thing. And I'm sure some of the big developers today would use their own botnet, secret botnet farms to drive their apps up the charts. Why wouldn't they? As long as they don't get caught. Another company you probably haven't heard of. Does anyone recognize that logo? So that is Burstly. Does anyone recognize the name of Burstly? So they are bigger than you think. I happened across them one day in TechCrunch. They're a mobile advertiser and they had just set up a portal to mediate adverts for big companies. And the only one at the time they were doing was Words with Friends. They now mediate, Newtoy at the time, who are now Zynga, they mediate Backflip, another huge company, Rovio, Zynga, and EA. If you want your adverts in any of their games, you go through Burstly. The funny thing was, because it just started, I advertised on there at 5 cents cost per click, which today would get people very excited. They also own TestFlight. I'm sure you've all heard of them. Like they're actually a really big company. And the point of this is that, I was there first. I was there very early. And this is an article from a website. I said, the truth is, both sides knew this acquisition would be a good fit. TestFlight founders were one of the first to integrate Burstly's product into their app. When Burstly raised their money, they went and bought TestFlight. I mean, it's important to go out and discover these things like Burstly and read the articles and get to these new cross-promotion opportunities, because 5 cents cost per click, I mean, it's amazing value. So I advertised on Words with Friends, which I felt had really good synergy with DoodleFind. It was this was post the Gtechna promotion, but I still wanted to try and experiment in the United States. And so this time I actually, instead of advertising DoodleFind free, I advertised DoodleFind paid to attempt to minimize my potential loss, because with a cost per click, if people do click on it and download it, I'm definitely going to get some money at the end of it. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through the advert I made. So this is my best attempt at making an advert, and I'm still quite proud of it. So It has attractive artwork. It has the Doodle Find name, as I mentioned before. It's fairly obvious what's going to happen. The owl icon, I eventually changed it to an owl, so I wanted to have icon recognition. So even if they didn't download it then, they might remember it later. I did a price drop. It was at $2.99 at the time, so I'm trying to drive that buy now or miss out scenario. And as I mentioned, I listed the price. I only want people to click on it if they're willing to pay 99 cents. And this is how the promotion went. Before that, on average, I was getting $70 a day. You can see the immediate rise in the early test adverts I did, and then I switched on the burst juice to jump it up the chart. It made it to number 44 paid game overall. It stayed there about a week before it slowly returned to normal, thanks to the App Store just happened to freeze during that period. So I got very lucky. And the free version went up during this time as well. If people didn't want the paid version on the chart, they were going out and finding the free version. The outcome is I turned $1,000 into $8,000. So I was very happy with that. So imagine if I'd spent $10,000 or $100,000, and that's, I mean, it wouldn't have worked the same, but I didn't want to bet the farm. Again, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible with my money. In the end, I was very happy with that. So I'm going to talk, it's quite funny. So I'm going to talk now about downloads over time in a bit more detail. So this is about the App Store and how the algorithm works. A few years ago, a company found out what I'm going to tell you, and they were gaming the App Store by getting everyone to download their game over a very short period of time. And they eventually found out and kicked off the App Store. So I'm going to call this the Magalona effect. So this is Maxine Magalona. She's a 25-year-old Filipino actress, very popular, soap actress, a number of movies. So this is, a few months ago, I was just checking my downloads and player numbers, and I found a weirdly large number of people suddenly playing Doodle Find. I started Googling and looking through the tweets, and I found a tweet by Maxine, which seemed to have a fair few retweets on it. It was kind of unusual. She's just saying she's playing Doodle Find. It's really good. I had a look at her page, and I nearly fell over when she says 880,000 followers, nearly all of them Filipino. So I went to the charts, and this is what I saw. From nothing to number 7, in the Philippines only, of course. So, I mean, the people must have downloaded it very quickly. I mean, a tweet is you have to be there to experience a tweet. And so the downloads probably happened within an hour or 2 hours, or maybe a day if someone was fairly slow. But it would have been a very narrow space of time. If you have a spike like this, though, if it ever happens to you, you'll notice after this, it will very rapidly drop down. I had the same thing, a similar thing happen. I was on television, featured on Australian television, again a few months ago, and during the 5-minute segment, I went to number 1. And by the end of that 24-hour period, I was back to wherever I was, because so many people had downloaded it in a 5-minute period. So this guy, you can imagine the effect that he had when he tweeted about Temple Run, like just astronomical. And they, the Temple Run guys are still, living off his tweet today. It is really very interesting. And so the lesson is there is no greater promotional tool than a celebrity tweet. Now, it makes me a little sad to say that, but that's just the truth of it, really. Okay, free advertising. Did I get your attention? Free advertising comes with a not-so-catchy slogan. Not nearly as effective as burst advertising, but a hell of a lot cheaper. And free advertising, obviously, that's the sort of viral success. So Doodle Find has Facebook integrated into it, and a fairly tight integration. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it follows the Bejeweled Blitz paradigm where once you get a score over a certain limit that week, it will prompt you to tweet your cool achievement and challenge your friends that way. That's really dated, unfortunately, and I hope one day to come in and improve the viral features of Doodle Find. But the Facebook integration, I think, it's been really important to the success of Doodle Find, the organic success of Doodle Find. Just makes it simple for players to challenge their friends, and like I said, I hope to improve it one day. Now, viral notifications get a bit of stick from indies, and the thing is that they're not that annoying. what you're trying to do is make it easy for friends to play with one another. You just sort of, I think that the best advice here is just sort of get over it. I mean, if you have a viral message in your game, people aren't going to think you're Zynga. There's a long way between a viral message and, evil cross promotion. But so just give it a try and be kind with it. Just put it in there and watch your players, watch your numbers grow. Ride the Thursday wave. I'm sure everyone knows that Thursday is the day to launch your app. For a while, it wasn't quite clear why to me. Everyone just did it, and I did an experiment. When I launched Little Things Forever on Thursday, I had an epiphany as to why. So I went on, pre-Thursday, did my posts on Touch Arcade, and what happens is that websites want to get a jump on Apple's promotion on Friday, and on Thursday they'll go digging for the apps that are probably going to be featured by Apple, and they'll promote them. So Little Things Forever was got a front page on Touch Arcade and on Polygon, because people are trying to, they're trying to be first. It's that hipster thing, and you want to be a part of that crowd, and so releasing on Thursday helps, at least to be associated with the big games that come out on Thursdays. So this is a bit of an interesting one. Cross-promote with your competitors. It seems very counterintuitive, but the thing is, on the App Store, it's not about someone has $100 to spend that week and they're going to buy one game and you have to fight. Instead, they have $100 and they're going to buy 100 games and they're going to buy more games that they like. And so working with your competitors or people who release similar apps to you're actually going to get a good boost out of it. You all know this game? So Doodle Find came before Fruit Ninja. You may not realise. That's how long I've been on the App Store. I actually helped promote Fruit Ninja on its launch day. It was actually developed by an Australian developer called Half Brick. And I was looking on App Shopper and came across it and downloaded it, as I do. And I really loved it. I was like, holy hell, this is fantastic. So I just wrote to them and said, do you want some free advertising? And they said, yes. Because Doodle Find at the time was very high up the chart. And I gave them the ads, and their chart place rose in Singapore and Australia, and UK and Germany, the places I had the most players. But they sort of looked like they were going to go, in those countries it was going to be okay, and then they got their Apple feature, and bam, the rest is history for those guys. And now I'd kill for some cross-promotion from them, but I'm sure we'll figure out a better way to pay me back someday. You may not have heard of this company. I just happened to play their game, Sudoku 2, one day, and I was really impressed with it. It had ads in it, great UI, was casual. I figured maybe they'd like to do some cross-promotion. So I just wrote to them out of the blue and said, hi, would you like to click trade? And they thought it was a great idea. And probably for the next 2 years, we used to help launch one another's games. And it worked really well. They're actually more popular than me now as well. Okay, I'll get over it. So cross-promotion synergy. Do you all know these two games? These were quite big. Anyone name them? They both have zombie in the title. Yeah, that's right. Zombie Gunship, and the other one is Zombie Highway. So Zombie Gunship came out first and had a great feature slot by Apple. They'd implemented a coin system. That was their first freemium game. Their other game was crappy before that. And they became the #1 grossing app. Like, they did really well. Zombie Highway is actually developed by his friend and came a bit later. Zombie Gunship had adverts in it, and when Zombie Highway was released, they advertised the hell out of, Zombie Gunship advertised Zombie Highway, and bam, that became a #1 app. But then, it's not just one way. What happened then is that Zombie Highway then continues to, they got new users that may not have played Zombie Gunship, and they fed back into one another, and it formed a synergy, and they continue to rebound traffic to one another constantly. And these guys are really rich, like really, really, really rich. They run they now do a podcast called Walled Garden Weekly, which is fantastic. I mean, if you're at this talk, you obviously have some interest in marketing, and these guys their podcast is brilliant. they have an episode where they discuss their successes. And at one point they said, well, they're trying to relate to the common man, and they said, well, in San Francisco, you can't just go out and buy a Ferrari because people will look at you funny because you're driving a gas guzzler, and so you have to buy a Tesla instead. Like a real sub story there. I feel sorry for them. So this is sort of a marketing lesson, but not quite. It's a little sidestep. This is a technique I've been using for years, which is don't target a demographic. It makes thinking about your app really easy, and I'll just give you a case study here. How many people have heard of this game? So I worked on this. I wouldn't say proudly, but it was definitely a game I worked on. It's not a game I would play myself, and nor talk about me playing. It was originally pitched by IDOS and Ian Livingston to us as Nintendogs with ponies, which really got my heart pumping. But it was a very clear pitch, and we had, but we still had regular arguments within the team about what the game should be. I mean, horse games at the time were really boring and crappy. It was equestrian and dressage and high society and exclusive clubs, and obviously I was completely uninterested in that, and I was certain that kids would be uninterested in that as well. And so I went on the internet and I found a picture. Now, this isn't the picture. I couldn't find it. It's gone from the interwebs now, but it's very close to this one. And so it's just a picture of a girl. She's not riding a horse. There's no fancy green fences, no saddle. She's not jumping. She hasn't got a hat on or jodhpurs, but you can see she is in love with her horse. She adores it, and she just loves horses. And that helped massively to shape the direction of the title. I made copies of the photo, put them all over the office, and so people wouldn't forget who they were making the game for. And it was great to settle design arguments. If someone ever said equestrian, I'd just rip the photo off the wall and show it to them. I said, do you think this little girl gives one little shit about show jumping? And argument settled. And the app went on to sell. It was a huge hit and went on to sell over 1 million copies. Unfortunately, reinvigorated the horse pet genre and massively cloned. But the pony game, because it was so heavily cloned, the pony game genre died out a few years later. So I did my part, and but IDOS made a lot of money. So also using this technique, Doodlefine and Super Search 60 were actually made for my wife, who was horribly addicted to Bejeweled Blitz. And I went, I'm going to make a game that she's going to like, and try to peel her off that game and onto mine. It worked for about a month, and eventually she went on to Bejeweled Blitz again. So can't win them all. Zona, which I made with Rich next door, was made for an artist called Sergey Seedlips, who I really loved, just an illustrator. So the aim was to create a game that was a living illustration and whose icon was, memorable, and I wouldn't be afraid to put on a T-shirt. And nearly all decisions I made were based on what I thought he would think was cool. And I wrote to him afterwards and told him that I made this game for him, and I ended up putting him in the credits too. Now, this wasn't necessarily a great marketing ploy. Illustrators don't tend to buy a lot of games, as I found out. In fact, Zona is my worst-selling game by a significant margin. But it reviewed really well, and got talked about by the indie crowd, and reviews noted the aesthetic. One day I'm going to make a game for my daughter. She will make a game that she plays for more than 3 minutes before she presses the home button. She's really an interesting case. So she has my old iPad, and I keep it stacked with the latest games that I download from App Shopper. Like just everything, whether they're hits or not, featured by Apple, cool icons, whatever. Yet she only plays the really big titles, and I don't know why. Cut the Rope, Where's My Water, Angry Birds, Bad Piggies. She has a sixth sense about what's popular, and so she'll be my secret weapon one day in the future, hopefully. So this is the only slide you actually need to remember. This is a summary. So what games do Apple like? Try and find that out using App Shopper. And if your app isn't selling, try to figure out why. There's lots of ways to do that. Make it easy for people to tell their friends about your game through viral spread. Keep small, do what you can, and only hire people where there is work you can't do. The only good paid advertising is burst advertising. Be the first to discover new cross-promotional opportunities. Thursday, nothing more to say about that. If you're not cross-promoting between your games or your friends, why not? It is a brilliant idea. And synergy is really important when cross-promoting. Don't cross-promote zombie gunship with pony friends. Let your players know in advance of new releases, and always try and target people and not a demographic. And the final point is keep small. You don't have to be Angry Birds to be a success. Just be small and be happy. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for NASCOM inviting me. And I believe